Okay.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. Salam wa hubb lil jamia. My name is Lama Khouri and I'm a co-founder of the Palestine-Global Mental Health Network, and a link of my bio will be posted in the chat. I am honored to be hosting today's meeting with my colleague Vivian Abu Alloul. Vivian is a Palestinian-American trauma-informed therapist. She serves on the steering committee of the USA Palestine Mental Health Network. And like all Palestinian mental health professionals, she is a member of Palestine-Global Mental Health Network. Vivian is a qualified supervisor and has previously provided supervision to clinicians in Gaza. The event is hosted by 3 organizations: the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, GCMHP, the Palestine Global Mental Health Network, and the Gaza Mental Health Foundation. And also links to their websites are available in the chat. A few housekeeping notes. This meeting is being recorded. If you are uncomfortable with being recorded and decide to leave the meeting, a recording will be sent to you in a day or 2. Everyone will enter the meeting muted to prevent disruptions, but you can share comments in the chat. During the Q&A period, please type the letter Q before your question, and I will read it out loud. It is a privilege together, for without hope, we wouldn't be here. And thank you for dedicating your time to join us. Today, I speak to you from the stolen land of the Lani Lenape, which was claimed and renamed as New York. We are here to discuss the GCMHP's second report. When we last convened in August 2024, Gaza had endured 301 days of genocide. Yesterday, a ceasefire was declared. But perhaps I don't need to remind you that settler colonial entities are non-agreement capable. We see the ceasefire being violated. And as Dr. Abu Sitte had mentioned, even if there's a ceasefire, the genocide and erasure will continue because of the destruction that Gaza endured. Prepared before the ceasefire, my remarks had marked 466 days of unrelenting carnage. Gaza has endured more bombing, higher child amputee rates, and unprecedented global live streaming of genocide. According to Oxfam, Gaza has seen more deaths in a year than any other recent war. International organizations label Gaza hell on earth for children. Beyond these tragedies, Gaza is also the graveyard of international law and Western morality. And now I will introduce the report, and my dear friend Vivian will help me out, Vivian. So the report that I will be summarizing is called There You Suffer and Die.
Hold on, let me, I'm gonna put the link for the post first for everyone in the chat, and then I'll share in the minute with the presentation. Okay, Lama, you're ready for me for the presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay. So let's do that here.
Oh, great. Thank you, Vivian. Is it possible to do the... Yeah, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vivian. So since August 2024, conditions for genocide survivors in Gaza have worsened drastically, which I'm sure is no surprise for anyone. Forced evacuations have led to overcrowded, unsafe living areas, causing malnutrition, starvation, and the spread of diseases. Slide 2. GCMHP conducted a grassroots survey that was conducted by 18 psychological first aid team. And I'm telling you, these people are absolutely phenomenal, considering the circumstances. And they surveyed and provide services to 26,000 men, women, and children. Slide 3. So the questions they asked three main areas. What are the needs and demands? And these needs and demands were, they gathered them by age and gender. The main complaints, psychological and social complaints, and the coping mechanisms people have been able to, use. Slide 4, the needs and demands, all the population needed, of course, we know, essential food, clean water, clothing, and psychological and educational resources. And the adults, they lost jobs, they wanted jobs, they needed medical care, mental health support. And when you read about the elderly, it's really heart-wrenching because they almost feel guilty for being, So they needed specialized supplies, financial aid, mobility aid, and that applies also with people with disabilities. Slide 5. So the complaints were, by and large, again, as we can imagine, PTSD symptoms with children, bedwetting, nightmares, aggressive behavior. Women had also high PTSD symptoms, domestic violence because of the stress people are under. And as we know, miscarriages in Gaza increased by 300%, partly from the stress, from the malnutrition, from the life they were living. And men, struggle with sense of helplessness and job loss. And with the elderly, it's this feeling of, always putting themselves last, letting the everybody eat before they eat, and so on. So slide 6, coping mechanisms. There were positive and negative coping mechanisms. In terms of positive, prayer, community involvement, creative problem solving. I mean, we saw videos of children, gardening and doing things like that to survive. And negative, aggression, substance use, isolation, denial, strain on relationships. Slide 7. So GCMHP served over 26,000 individuals, as I mentioned, and demonstrating this phenomenal work, to do this work when, remember, they are going through the genocide as well. And the report itself, which I think Vivian had placed in the chat, provides beautiful cases, really healing cases. And, in the announcement for the event, there was a link to Victoria's article, which also summarizes the report very beautifully about the things that were made. And the drawings you saw on the slides were all made by children who came and received treatment. And play therapy and drawing therapy seem to have been very healing. Slide 8, I would like to focus in slide 8 on just one case, which is this drawing is where the title of the report comes. There people suffer and die. The drawing is made by a 10-year-old Hala from Gaza's Al Zaytun neighborhood, who lived through unimaginable horrors. Artillery shells destroyed her grandparents' home, leaving her believing that her family died, especially her sisters. And although she reunited with them, this trauma lingers. So she would wake up at night screaming, wake her parents up, and she's irritable, aggressive, haunted with nightmares. And the work that GCMHP provided through art therapy gave her moments of joy. She's not healed particularly, but she would say things like, finally there's some joy and happiness here. So I'm going to, the slide is off now. I'm going to introduce Victoria Brittain. And before I introduce Victoria, I want to say for everyone here on this journey towards the sure liberation of Palestine, comrades become friends and family. They know your suffering, witness your trauma, and acknowledge your reality. In this understanding lies incredible healing, and it's my honor to introduce Victoria, who is a longtime supporter and friend of GCMHP, and who was involved in it for many years, including during the leadership of Dr. Iyad Sarraj. She began working in 1968 in Washington, freelance for The Times and The New Statesman, then moved to Vietnam, continuing with The Times. She lived and worked in Algiers, Nairobi for 7 years and became The Guardian correspondent. After 25 years with The Guardian as associate foreign editor, she reported widely in Africa, Gaza, the West Bank, Cuba, and Grenada. She has contributed to various media, including Le Monde, Diplomatique, Afrique, Political, Quarterly, and currently Afrique 21. Victoria has authored books on the Cold War in Africa, the US War on Terror, focusing on Guantanamo as co-author of Enemy Combatant with Moazem Beg, and The Shadow Lives, the Forgotten Women of the War on Terror. Most recently, she wrote Love and Resistance in the Films of May Masri on the Palestinian filmmakers' work. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Victoria.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Well, Lama, thank you very much for that very embarrassingly extensive review of my life. Thank you very much. As you said, it's a real honor to be with you all tonight to talk about this amazing second report by GCMHP. It's a report, as she said, on the needs and on the ongoing mental health care on the ground. And in this second year of the accelerating genocide, when there's not a single safe place to be, people are terrified, starving, saturated by grief and loss. The present and the future needs are incalculable, we can all imagine. But professional and loving mental health care is part of the humanity which lives on in Gaza, as the report so beautifully illustrates. This evening, I want to share with you some responses I received to the article that Lama mentioned, which I wrote about the report. Overwhelmingly, the most common reaction was incredulity. People said, I had no idea this kind of work was even possible in Gaza. And mostly, these comments came from people who follow Gaza closely. And of course, the images that filled their heads were of the physical destruction of Gaza on a massive scale, and of Gaza's people endlessly on the move, in cars, on bikes, in donkey carts, and on foot, carrying their dwindling belongings and their truncated families from one unsafe place to another unsafe place. And the desperately needed aid and the Israeli policy of preventing it reaching Gaza's people, which these people were reading about, is aid from the UN and big Western NGOs. And what's too often missing in the picture is how Palestinians' own individual and collective agency is absolutely central in living through this genocide with unimaginable dignity. Now, instead of me being here talking to you now, I really wish we could be watching somebody from Gaza, a young Palestinian journalist called Abu Bakr Abed, who I saw recently, speaking in English and backed by a huge group of Palestinian journalists in their blue press vests, black jackets. And this is part of what he said. For 459 days, we have been living journalistic genocide against us. We have been immolated, incinerated, disemboweled, and the world's dead consciousness has not seen how we have suffered every sort of torture, while Israel has impunity. We have been let down, especially by the international media. These vests don't protect us, Palestinian journalists. But if we had blonde hair and blue eyes, you would be standing foot by foot with us. Well, for a journalist to read that was heartrending and shaming. And when I think, can it really be true that between October the 7th, 2023, and December 26th, the following year, have we really seen 222 journalists and media workers killed by Israel in Gaza, many of them targeted by their press vests? They include 5 on that last day, December 26th, when an Israeli airstrike targeted a rare news van outside Al-Auda hospital in Jabalia camp in northern Gaza in the besieged moment. And those 5 were filming what Israel does not want to be seen. Those 5 died. Gaza's journalists have worked on regardless of conditions of genocide, starvation, unimaginable loss and grief. Their testimonies were absolutely essential to the evidence used by the ICJ and the ICC and the numerous UN and NGO reports. The texture of the genocide they're living fills social media and some Arabic channels. But these journalists feel that we, who write and read the Western media, have let them down, as he said, let them down by absorbing narratives based on Israeli sources. Well, we've certainly failed them in getting our letters and our articles with a different tone into the mainstream media, but we continue trying. And within the media, there are signs of changes and younger people having more power, and there will be more. But our most important failure is that we've had absolutely no impact on our own governments in the West, which continue arming Israel, protecting it diplomatically, and with their silence, they normalize the mass killing of women and children, and the torture, the humiliation, the arrests and deaths in custody of Gaza's intellectuals and leaders in every field. Several respondents to my article told me they couldn't bear to read these articles about Gaza anymore or watch TV. Perhaps that goes for our politicians. 80 years ago, the poet T.S. Eliot wrote this line: "Humankind cannot bear too much reality." I first used that line 40 years ago in a report from southern Angola about the US-backed apartheid South African soldiers who put a Namibian peasant woman on a roasting spit. Today, T.S. Eliot's words are right for Gaza and right for some of our politicians here in the UK. These people can't bear to think of the bodies of small children being eaten by cats and dogs overnight, while Israeli military made it impossible to collect the little bodies for every day's dignified burials and prayers in Gaza. They don't want to think of 6-year-old Hind, who spent 3 hours trapped in a car with 6 of her dead relations, menaced by an Israeli tank. Hind was on her dead cousin's phone to the Palestine Red Crescent staff, begging them to rescue her, while they simultaneously were trying to patch in her mother to speak to her and trying to coordinate safe passage with the Israeli military for an ambulance to reach Hind. Israeli forces targeted that ambulance, killing the 2 paramedics in the rescue team. Yusuf Zaina and Ahmed al-Madoun were murdered. Hind Rajab was murdered too. The Israeli tank was later found to have fired 335 rounds into that family car. All this was recorded in unforgettable detail on film. To choose not to see is to lose humanity. To remember is to honor humanity. And today, Hind's inescapable portraits, 20 feet high, with a red rose in her hair next to her green and white hairband and her smiling little face, appear on walls in Dublin and London and many other places that I don't know about. And the Hind Rajab Foundation, based in Belgium, is working through legal action to break that cycle of Israeli impunity and thus honor the memory of the victims of this genocide. The Foundation has filed evidence of war crimes with the ICC. The Foundation has also filed legal requests for arrests for individual war crimes in countries which include Italy, Sweden, Brazil, and Argentina against individual Israeli soldiers, including one very senior officer. So they've put 1,000 questions, 1,000 names to the ICC. May there be a result. Choosing to remember is also central to the sick from genocide mass movement of doctors, mainly in the US and Canada, who in hundreds took a day off from normal work to protest eloquently the unacceptable impact of genocide on their colleagues in Gaza and on their own ability to function in accordance with medical ethics. They started pop-up clinics in the name of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, and the widely viewed solidarity webinars of Doctors Against Genocide are ongoing and growing in numbers, with a gathering planned outside the US Congress on February the 17th. This is because doctors are central to the moral leadership of society. I ended my article a month ago highlighting Dr. Hussam's repeated defiance of Israeli orders to leave his besieged Kamal Adwan hospital and his 150 patients. He is, like the mental health workers in their continuity that we're talking about today, is part of the web of determined humanity that lives on in Gaza. Today, Dr. Hussam's hospital is burned to the ground, and his male staff were seen and filmed being dispersed by Israeli soldiers, walking in their underwear under armed guards to unknown destinations. Dr. Hussam was taken away. He was beaten and tortured and has been seen by other prisoners in the inhuman Israeli torture prison of Sde Taiman. The worldwide campaign that's ongoing for Dr. Hussam's freedom is humanity speaking with his father and with Gaza. This current moment of fragile temporary ceasefire is one for humanity to be heard and politicians to be heard and seen. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres must give a different kind of leadership and drop the deference to Western power, which has castrated the UN's effective action against the Israeli genocide. 333 UN staff have been killed by Israel. UNRWA, the irreplaceable UN aid agency for Palestinians, is threatened by Israel with closure at the end of this month, and much of the US Congress is also for its imminent closure. Mr. Guterres could announce that he's leading a visit to Gaza now, including the head of the World Health Programme, Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, the UN Head Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, the head of the UN Commission of Inquiry, Navi Pillay, the new head of UN Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, the Special Rapporteur, heroic Francesca Albanese, alongside senior political leaders from at least Spain, Norway, and Ireland. These senior UN officials are responsible to the world, to all of us, for moral leadership, not to the leaders of a few powerful countries whose own citizens largely reject them for their acceptance of this genocide and being the power which enables it. This disrespect and disempowering of the United Nations and the decades of ethics, idealism, and law behind it is unforgivable and has to be resisted. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you. Right. Exactly what we need to hear. Thank you so much. So I am going to play two videos from that were prepared by GCMHP to give us a flavor of the situation on the ground and what does it mean to provide mental health services in this moment. So let me try. Okay, here we are. Okay. Can you hear?
غزة تعاني منذ سنوات من عدوانات متكررة، ولكن الحرب الأخيرة على القطاع كانت الأشد ضرراً ووحشية. عام على الحرب ولا تزال مستمرة على قطاع غزة، وقد تم خلالها كل أشكال الإبادة الجماعية، وخلفت أكثر من 40,000 شهيد و100,000 جريح أغلبهم من النساء والأطفال. كما شهدت تدميراً وحشياً للبنية التحتية والمنازل والمستشفيات والمدارس، ونزوح أكثر من 2,000,000 شخص لأكثر من مرة دون مأوى ولا مأمن ولا ملبس ولا مأكل ولا مشرب، واستهدفوا بشكل مباشر في أماكن نزوحهم. هذه الأحداث خلقت تداعيات نفسية واجتماعية معقدة وصعبة. برنامج غزة للصحة النفسية كان حاضراً في الميدان، حيث سخر خبراته في تنفيذ خطة الاستجابة الطارئة منذ اليوم الأول للحرب، وقدم خدمات الإسعاف النفسي الأولي والإرشاد النفسي الهاتفي، وواصل تقديم العلاج النفسي المتخصص والأدوية حسب الظروف الميدانية، كما تعاون مع المؤسسات ومقدمي الخدمات الآخرين في إحالة واستقبال الحالات التي كانت بحاجة إلى الرعاية النفسية المتخصصة. كذلك تم العمل على افتتاح مقرات مؤقتة لتسهيل وصول المستفيدين إلى خدماته، بالإضافة إلى خدمات الرعاية والإشراف الداعم التي قدمها إلى المهنيين والعاملين في المجال الإنساني. كما تم تنفيذ برامج توعوية مجتمعية مختلفة من خلال جلسات التثقيف النفسي وغيرها من الأدوات الإعلامية.
حرصنا في برنامج غزة للصحة النفسية ومنذ الوهلة الأولى لهذا العدوان الغاشم على قطاع غزة على الاستمرار في تقديم خدماتنا النفسية الشمولية والمتخصصة للسكان. وضعنا خطة الاستجابة الطارئة والتي لا تركز فقط على تقديم خدمات العلاجية من علاج نفسي ودوائي للمرضى، وإنما أيضا تتجاوز ذلك لتقدم خدمات إرشادية وخدمات وقائية مختلفة. فعلى سبيل المثال تقوم فرقنا الميدانية فرق الإسعاف النفسي الأولي بزيارة النازحين في أماكن تواجدهم، تحاول تقديم الخدمات الإرشادية اللازمة للآباء والأمهات في كيفية التعامل مع الأطفال وقت الأزمات، تحاول تقديم دفعة من الدعم النفسي للأطفال في أماكن وجودهم، نحاول الاستمرار بتقديم خدمات مختلفة. تواجهنا بعض الصعوبات، لا شك أن من أهم هذه الصعوبات هي فقداننا لمقراتنا الرئيسية وأيضا استشهاد بعض زملائنا، ولكننا نستمر في تقديم هذه الخدمات النفسية وعلى أمل أن ينتهي هذا العدوان بشكل عاجل وقريب.
حسب تقييمات نفسية أجراها برنامج غزة للصحة النفسية، فإن هناك أكثر من 2,000,000 شخص تأثروا خلال هذه الحرب، وأن عددا كبيرا منهم سيعاني من جروح نفسية وجسدية ستستمر طوال حياتهم، وقد يتعرض أغلبهم بما في ذلك الأطفال لصدمات نفسية شديدة. فمن الطبيعي أن يصاب الناس باضطرابات نفسية بعد أي كارثة أو أزمة مثل الاكتئاب واضطراب ما بعد الصدمة، بينما يعاني آخرون من ضغوط نفسية. ونتيجة لذلك تبرز أهمية الخدمات التي يقدمها برنامج غزة للصحة النفسية.
ممكن نتكلم عن العلامات والأعراض النفسية اللي ممكن يعاني منها مقدمي الخدمات النفسية الذين يعيشون في ظروف ضاغطة وقاهرة مثل التي يعيشها المجتمع الفلسطيني هذه الأيام؟ من هذه العلامات هي الخوف المستمر على حياتهم وحياة أحبائهم، القلق من المستقبل المستمر، أيضا هذا كله يؤثر أحيانا على الإنجاز والدافعية للعمل، بالإضافة إلى مشاكل في النوم ومشاكل في التركيز، وأحيانا تحدث بعض أو توتر في العلاقات بين الزملاء داخل العمل. فهنا برزت أهمية وجود برامج لدعم الداعمين لمقدمي الخدمات في المهن الإنسانية للحفاظ على دافعيتهم للعمل، وأيضا على الحفاظ على العافية النفسية التي يجب أن يتمتعوا بها لمزيد من الإنتاج وتقديم أفضل الخدمات الممكنة للمستفيدين.
من أكثر الاضطرابات الموجودة هي اضطراب ما بعد الصدمة، ولكن احنا بدناش نستبق ونحكي ما بعد الصدمة لأن الصدمة لن تنتهي بعد. هناك اضطرابات قلق، وهناك اضطرابات اكتئاب، وهناك اضطرابات يعني في النوم وغير ذلك. فئة الأطفال تحديداً هم يعني أكثر ناس بتعاني لأنه ما عندهم مقومات أو الآليات الدفاع اللي تحميهم من تطور اضطرابات عصبية. وإذا حكينا عن فئة النساء، فالنساء يعني حالياً يعني الأم اللي بتفقد زوجها أكيد رح تمثل دور الأم والأب، وهذه بحاجة يعني هي دورها كأم وكأخت وكابنة. وإذا حكينا عن فئة الرجال فبرضو الرجال يعانون ما يعانون لأنهم هم الفئة المستهدفة في القتل، هم الفئة المستهدفة بالعنف بالقتل والاعتقال، وشفنا حالات كثير من حالات التعذيب والاعتقال. فصراحة إجمالا المجتمع كله بحاجة للدعم النفسي، لأنه بكافة أطراف المجتمع وكافة فئاته هم تعرضوا لكافة أشكال العذابات وهم بحاجة إلى دعم نفسي واجتماعي. بيبدأ عمل برنامج غزة للصحة النفسية من ميدان طبعا، إنه هناك فرق عندنا مكونة من أخصائيين نفسيين مدربين، وهذه الفرق بتزور أماكن النزوح وأماكن الإيواء والناس اللي بحاجة لتدخل نفسي، وأي شخص بحاجة لدعم نفسي متخصص يتم تحويله إلى مراكزنا.
أصبح الأطفال يعانوا من كثير من الأعراض، منها أعراض ما بعد الصدمة مثل الحركة الزائدة، العدوانية، القلق أثناء النوم، تبول لا إرادي. أصبح الطفل مطلوب منه يوميا أنه يجمع الحطب، أنه يعبي مي كل يوم. صار ما بين الخيام يتعرف على سلوكيات، هذه السلوكيات كمان أصبحت مش في النمط المعتاد له. برنامج غزة للصحة النفسية لنا كان تدخلات طويلة في مجال الصحة النفسية، والتي انعكست من خلال خبرة المهنيين على الواقع الميدان في التعامل مع الأطفال، خاصة من خلال التدخلات من خلال الرسم، من خلال اللعب. في كان تدخلات العلاقة من البداية في موضوع الفرق الإسعاف الأول النفسي اللي يعني يوميا في الميدان.
صحتنا تعبانة وعقلنا مش في راسنا وكل حياة معنا مدمرة. 7 أدوار عايشين في خيمة، يعني بناخذ من طفل صغيرة لما بدنا نعجل بصعوبة، لما بدنا نيجي نطبخ في قلبها بصعوبة، كل شيء بنعمله بصعوبة، إن كل شيء صار فيها الخيمة. يعني شفت مناظر مرعبة جدا جدا لحتى الآن أنا مش قادر أنساها. بيجيني أحلام كوابيس في الليل زي هيك، يعني أما أنا مش قلبي قوي، يعني مش إني خايف، بس لحتى لما أتأثر بقعد أبكي، لا بنام لا باكل، لا يعني خلص عندي صدمة كبيرة من الموقف اللي شفته. يعني عندي صدمة مش صدمة نفسية، صدمة أمر من الصدمة النفسية.
قعدت في مستشفى بين جرحى مصابين أشلاء طول الوقت، يعني قعدت 3 شهور بمعاناة بمعنى الكلمة. أنا وأولادي عانينا بمعنى الكلمة من كتر المشاهد اليومية، مش يعني في كل دقيقة في كل ثانية كان عندنا نشوف مجازر لحد ما نفسيتنا تعبت. وأولادي امتنعوا عن الأكل عن الشرب هناك، إحنا امتنعنا، يعني قعدنا تقريبا بقالي 6 شهور أكتر 7 شهور امتنعني عن الأكل، حتى أولادي تغيروا نفسيتهم كل إشي.
احنا اول اشي كنا نروح على المدرسة ونيجي ونروح، الحين ولا في مدرسة ولا في حاجة. ويعني اليوم نصحى من على الساعة 6-5 بتيجي المي الحلوة، بنروح بنعبي وبنروح بنساعد برضه الأسرة، بنروح مشاوير بعيدة بنساعدها بنجيب لها أشياء. امبارح يعني صار معنا حدث وأنا بنسيرة عن القصف والرعب طول الليل، ما عرفتش ننام، ضرب 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 طول الليل، قاعدين وخايفين فيش مكان نشرب فيه، ولا بطلع هنا ولا هنا بضربوه، وخوف وشهداء وإصابات. نفسنا تنتهي الحرب، نرجع لحياتنا الطبيعية، نرجع للمدارس، نرجع أشياء كثير فقدناها من الأسرة، وكل يعني فقدنا كل شيء من الأسرة، من تعليم، من غدا، من كل حاجة فقدناها.
دكتور ياسر، بتحب أعمل الفيديو الثاني كمان؟ شو رأيك؟ ابتسامة راح أعمل فيديو.
الفيديو الثاني أعتقد أقصر هو، أو إذا يعني
خلينا نعمل مستاهل.
أوكي على الله.
Okay, here you are. Here.
We don't see it, Lama.
اوكي ايامات. اوكي شكرا قلت لي، لانه ايامات بدها a couple of tries. اسفة جدا. هلا بنرجع كمان دور. let's see. مش عارفة هلا شايفين اشي؟
تمام.
ايه اوكي. لا سوري هذا هو.
لما الصوت مش طالع.
مش طالع الصوت؟
لا أنا مش سامعيته، ما بعرف if everyone سامع.
Can you hear the sound or there was no sound? Was there sound?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the sound.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's just music, so I think we
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought there was no sound.
Okay, here continuing.
Sorry.
تحترمي نفسك. اصل بصي انا كده انا جبت اخري.
Okay, here we are. Okay, apologies everyone. Thank you for watching this amazing work, honestly. So I will introduce our next two speakers. So let me see. I messed up things a little bit. Apologies for that. So I will introduce Dr. Yasser Abu Jamei and Gwyn Daniel, and they are, for me, amazing support. So Dr. Yasser Abu Jamei and Gwyn Daniel will provide a valuable perspective from the latest report that I summarized in the beginning. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Yasser for over 5 years. Witnessing his unwavering dedication to his mission amidst turmoil, he is truly an inspiring example. Despite his gentle and reserved nature, Dr. Yasser consistently offers profound wisdom and clear insight in every discussion. One of his memorable quotes, which I often mention and resonates with me very deeply, is, "I want my patients to be happy, not just resilient." This statement challenges the commonly celebrated notion of mere endurance, shedding light on the significant emotional burden it places on our community. Additionally, Dr. Yasser conveys a deeply meaningful message on the GCMH website. It says, "Healing the soul and instilling hope." Dr. Yasser has become a close friend and a guiding compass for right action and steadfastness on this journey of life. Gwyn Daniel, a family therapist from Oxford, has been a reliable supporter and outspoken critic of Israeli policies. Her contributions go beyond therapy. She has played a crucial role in advocating for Palestinian rights and raising global awareness of our plight. Gwyn's insightful perspective and persistent advocacy have been vital in our pursuit for liberation. Her talent for expressing our suffering and affirming our experiences, especially when they are frequently overlooked or dismissed internationally, is both touching and empowering. For many Palestinians I know, Gwyn has been our rock. Her clarity, dedication, love for Palestine and Palestinian people instills hope and determination. And the floor is yours, Gwyn and Yasser.
Thank you so much, Lama, for that incredibly generous introduction. And before starting the conversation with Yasser, I just wanted to offer a couple of reflections on the report and reflections about this current moment. And I also wanted to say, in relation to the T.S. Eliot quote that Victoria used, that for me, what helps us bear reality is being connected to people like you, Lama, people like you, Victoria, people like you, Yasser and Vivian, and all the other people in the solidarity movement. Because we're connected, we can bear reality, and we can hear the testimonies that our dear friends and colleagues from Gaza present us with. We are able to listen and to act because we stay connected. So for me, that's absolutely cardinal. At the moment, we're in this really quite weird and horrible period between the announcement of a ceasefire and it happening. And it feels to me as if we are at a moment when the brutal inequities of power are exposed, so that the people who hold the power can play their political games. They can intensify the destruction of Gaza at will, and they are doing it because they can. And we're also at a moment where this brutal power politics is confronting the determined collectivity of Gaza's citizens in saying, we will not allow ourselves to be deprived of sharing joy and hope for the future, however risky it is. And it is risky because people who gather together to celebrate are being targeted. But I think the absolute determination of people to stay together, to be together, to express themselves in the face of this hideous military onslaught, I find so incredibly moving. And now we know, of course, that as Lama has said, that if the ceasefire comes into action, and we can still be cheated out of it, of course, we also know that many, many of the problems of Gaza's citizens will not just be continuing, but will also be intensified. People facing the future also have to return to the rubble of their homes, face what has been done to their loved ones. We know all the issues that will surface when people are less immediately afraid and when the trauma reactions begin to face them, and when people are confronted with the lack of community safety, and when people are confronted with the deprivation of their agency. But one absolute shining example of agency is the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. And they spearheaded by people who are part of the same community of suffering as the people that they are helping. Lama has outlined the report, and I won't repeat it now, but just to say a couple of things, that the list of needs in and of itself is an absolutely crushing indictment of Israel, of course, but also of the international community, so that aid trucks coming in have had to prioritize food over all the other essentials that people need to survive the winter weather. And this onslaught on people's ability to survive, but also on their core values. So the very thought, as was reported in the latest report, that elderly people would feel a burden to their families, when that runs so counter to every value that Palestinians hold dear. It may be a common story in the West, but it is absolutely not a story in Palestine. And I think that's just one example of the moral injury forced upon people when they have to confront these challenges to their key values. I'm just going to say one thing about the report, and then Yasser and I will start our conversation. Most of the cases presented in detail are those of children. But what is so remarkable about these testimonies is the extraordinary detail and specificity of children's experience, their positions in the family, the children they're closer to, the sense that they made of what was happening to them. All of these intimate descriptions contribute to a profoundly humanizing narrative, and they counter what we could call a very thin description of traumatized child. All of them are heartrending, but they all have different subjective experiences. Ahmed suffering the deaths of his sisters and his own devastating brain injury. Karim's feelings of abandonment when left alone in a car during a bombardment. Hala's nightmares and her shock at the transformation of her beloved UNRWA school into a place of horror and fear. Allah's participation in a death march out of the ruins of Al-Shifa Hospital. Sarah's desperate longing for her father when she was critically injured. Samar's grief at the death of the beloved sister she was so close to. Farah's terrifying experience of displacement and the burden of all her new tasks and responsibilities. Not one of these can be encapsulated by the category of PTSD. And the report contains so much riches and death, and the tribute to the unique suffering of every single child. Now, I would like now to start the conversation with you, Yasser. And it is, you know, you are somebody who I admire almost more than anybody. You are an extraordinary exemplar of our profession. And it was a massive privilege to be in conversation with you in August last year. And it's a huge privilege to be in conversation with you again. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I just wanted to start really with the last of the 3 points in the report, which is about coping and question of positive ways of coping. And in the report, among them were spiritual values, living with available resources, finding practical solutions, which might include what you called primitive tools, and communication, connection, and community. So I wonder how you think that the coping skills the team identified, how do you think they're applicable to the team themselves, and what it is that you feel has enabled the team to keep going in the absolutely remarkable way that they have? I think I'd like to start with that because that locates us within the experience of these absolutely remarkable people.
Well, let me begin by thanking you very much, Gwyn, and thanking Lama, Victoria, Vivian, and of course all the attendees who are with us this evening or afternoon. This is a very important question actually about coping, and all the time we think how we can really work in improving the coping or developing more coping mechanisms among the population. And that's why this was one of the questions that we asked our PFA workers, who are usually graduates of psychology, sociology, or nursing, and they visit the tents, the shelters, as you saw in the video. And it was a great idea really to play the video because it showed how really things work on the ground. So how people cope with the difficulties or the challenges. And if you look at it from one aspect, you will find some individual means of coping with the atrocities that the people are facing on a daily basis, with the traumas that they are facing. But in another sense, it has a more collective, actually, dynamic. For example, when we speak about spirituality, yes, it could be individualistic, but it's more of at a more a collective level. When people try to help each other, that the material resources are very important, especially when things are very scarce and when you don't find even food, when you don't find material or cooking gas, for example, and you find it really difficult even to heat a little water for your child to make, for example, a small cup of milk, just for a feeding bottle. And that's why what we noticed is that it's more of spirituality. People more go into faith. They pray more. They ask God to help them more, and they try to pray together. And this is apparent despite the fact that I think most of the mosques now in Gaza are really destroyed or not there, but still some of the people continue to have those gathering of prayers. And a big part of it is faith in Allah or in God, and whatever happens to the person is really it's his destiny, And part of that faith or part of that belief is that it's a destiny that you are Palestinian. It's a destiny that you were born in Palestine. It's a destiny that you have a fair and justice case. It's a destiny that you are struggling with occupation. It's your destiny that you are in such a condition that even when such genocide is committed, unfortunately, the international community is not helping. So what can one person do, when it comes to positive coping mechanism? Another aspect which we use all the time to speak about historically, but unfortunately not that much this time, is the strong social ties or family networks among people. Unfortunately, this is a little bit faded And that's because no one really has any material resources. I think the World Bank or another international organization just said loudly many months ago that now everyone in Gaza Strip is under the poverty line. So I don't have money to support myself. I don't have material to support myself. How can I support my brothers, sisters, parents, nieces, etc., etc.? So that's why the more spiritual aspects of it are coming more apparent. And then the little things appear. And for example, you really feel happy if you are able to just find bread. For the last 2 months, it was obvious that in the whole southern areas of Gaza Strip and the whole Gaza Strip, actually, there are a problem. There is a big problem with flour, And bread is the very basic and simple thing that you need to eat. Even people under poverty line used all the time to eat bread with anything, that could be just with oil, that could be just with smashed pepper, red pepper, the very famous Gazawi pepper or some sort of things. Of course, za'atar, dug, and all of these little things. But bread became a big problem. So one of the things that people enjoyed, for example, that the families of 10 people started to receive one just parcel, 25 kilograms of bread. And that was enough to make the whole neighborhood happy, hoping that the next one will be me. So it's really the situation that is unbearable, unbelievable, came with a lot of some additional coping mechanism. And we are really grateful that people continue to find some sort of mechanisms that help them go on with their lives despite the very challenging situation.
Thank you. Yes, I was reflecting on the words of your colleague in the video who used the word torture, that the whole population are being tortured. And I was thinking particularly about the torture of all the death, destruction, killing, deprivation of all the kinds you've spoken about, but also the torture of pushing people into isolation from each other and the feeling of being completely uncared about. And it seemed to me that your report, your data collection, was a very powerful psychological intervention in and of itself, because it conveyed to people, particularly the 23-year-old young woman who'd lost all her family and wanted to kill herself because she felt so alone, she was given the message, you are not alone. And this team are somehow, with the people that they connect to, providing a very powerful message that we want to know about you. We want to know about your needs. We can't fulfill them. But what you think and feel and needs really matters. And so I just wonder if you could say something about how the team works in terms of strengthening connections between people. It came across strongly in the work with the families of the children, particularly, but I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about how the team, what the team's philosophy about doing that is.
Well, in a sense, it's really very complicated. It's not easy. In a sense, all the population of Gaza Strip is almost going through the same circumstances one way or the other. At one moment or the other, For example, famine was loud and clear in the northern areas of Gaza Strip on the first half of 2024. The second half, it became more obvious in the southern areas. Bombardment happened everywhere. Now even tents are being bombed, which is ridiculous, but that's something that continues to happen. Displacement continues to be. Not a single person, I think, in Gaza Strip was displaced or never was not displaced. Everyone was displaced. So one way or the other, you went through the same circumstances. And that's why everyone might feel the same. But on the other hand, everyone has his or her own individual story. that is a little bit different in the details from the others. And these little differences make a really big issue. It's a big difference whether, for example, your house was bombed and you were near it and you were not harmed, from your house was bombed and you were inside the house and all of your family have survived, from everyone died, just 4 or 5 people survived, from everyone survived or died, only one survived. 2 days ago, our dear colleague Rafat Salha, who is a human rights defender, who works for the committee for independent committee for human rights in Gaza Strip. He was the house they were staying in was bombed. All his family members were killed, including his wife and kids. He was severely injured and he was in the intensive care unit. A day later, he passed away. Most of our friends, I would say, felt that it's somehow better that he passed away rather than to live just with being alone with all people around him, all his beloved ones got killed in. So in a sense, all are living the same circumstances, but in a sense, everyone feels being isolated. Now, on top of all of that, the ones who are really isolated are the ones who lost everyone around them. All the relatives were lost. And these are not one or two, these are thousands of people, including kids, you know. Yesterday we were talking about the number of orphans now in Gaza that resulted from the current genocide, more than 20,000 children. More than 500 of them, those orphans, are also injured. Many of them, tens of them, they were left with no one else to look after them. And then the question, where you can find them? I remember in January, I was still in a shelter, and I was at a normal school before. I moved into a tent because I felt the tent is more, you are more independent than being in a shelter. At least with my wife and kids, we were together for the first time after 2 months of being displaced. So the school counselor came to me and told me, "Look, doctor, there's something very strange." I said, "What? Tell me." He said, "By a chance," this is what he said, "by a chance, we discovered a girl who's just 11. And we found out that she is the only person in the class with the other woman, but she had no relatives at all. We don't know whether her relatives are alive or dead. We don't know if that. She comes from the north. She came with other family members, but she doesn't know anything about her family. What can we do with her?" And this is something that the team faces really in the ground in many ways. And one of them is the young lady who was just 23 years old, her story was in the report. And for this kind of circumstances, the very important thing is to convey a very clear, direct, and certain message. You are not alone. We are here for you. This is one thing. There will be some people around you. And then it's not just saying it. You know, this is very important. You can't just say that and leave.
Doing it. Yeah.
You cannot really do that. I mean, then you will lose whatever relationship that you could build with your with this client or with this person. So you need really to be there for minutes, for hours. You need to go there the second day, the third day, and then you need to actively work on finding a family for that person, you know. And that family could be around, could be cousins, could be uncles, or it could be like, you know, aunts. It could be people. In that case, she had some aunts around her. But then how you make sure that the connection is established, how you make sure that her extended relatives are capable, or they have the capacity, or they have the space to take her in, because this is a very difficult challenge. You know, each nuclear family was almost, and still it's hard for each family just to manage, to find food, you know, to find clean water, to find something that would help the children. I talked to people there, and I know some of my relatives, they were like, you know, sparing the bread for the younger children and not eating themselves, you know, the parents, for days and sometimes for weeks, because there isn't that enough food for everyone. So you need to do it, and you need to make sure that it's there, that it's happening, and that a connection is established not only with you but with people around that person.
And I think what you've just said has really made me think about Yasser, it's the whole question of trust. So that if people say you're not alone, they go ahead and they act on it, and they keep connected. And for some people like that 23-year-old young people to believe that really indicates how much they trust the team members who will support them.
Well, Gwyn, also something very important. The team members are themselves victims of what's going on. Let me say survivors. Let me say heroes of the what's going on. And when they help because they at the same time they know the reality. They know what does it mean to be isolated, because each one could be isolated himself or herself. I have members of the team whose house was bombed and they were inside, and they luckily survived. I have other members who lost children. Now they are working and doing great work for GCMHP, and for the society and for the population. So they have gone through these circumstances, but still they know what they should do, and because they had it, they felt it, they received that kind of care by their friends, by their colleagues, and now they are offering it. It's a very important all the time to keep in mind the importance of helping your own staff. As a manager, when I tell them, yes, I know what you are talking about. I was in a school. I know what you are talking about. I was in a tent. I spent 4 months in it. I had problems even finding hot water for my 2.5-year-old then, who was in need just to have a bottle of milk. I mean, and that brings a lot of comfort to the team members, and the sense of agency when they are able to help, and when they see the reaction, how they are perceived by the community, how they are perceived by the persons, how those beneficiaries are improving. This is the main thing that really keeps them running and keeps them working.
I think that's such an important point, and the connection between recovery from trauma, if we can even use such a word, and a sense of agency is so deeply connected. And for your team to experience a sense of being helpful, and therefore a sense of keeping their professional self-esteem alive, even though they're suffering in the ways that they are, that must be so important. I just wanted to ask you, because the report speaks about the particular issues for women and men and for the elderly, and it's particularly important that it refers to what the issues for people with disabilities. But just speaking about women and thinking about the particular impacts on women of the lack of any kind of healthcare when women are giving birth, the attack on women's capacity to nurture their babies, to keep their babies nourished when they themselves are starving, and also the sort of more intangible things such as the humiliation, the lack of hygiene, the lack of privacy. And I just wonder if you could say a little bit about how you feel the team are working with women on those issues, because they're so profound.
I think one of the main issues, or one of the main things, is to empower people, really, And the reality there is that everyone has a lot of things in his or in her mind, and people lose some kind of sensitivity. They just forget that there is a baby that needs to be fed by her mom, that there is a child who needs some special type of care, that there is a woman who needs some kind of privacy, that everyone needs a shower, every second or third day at the latest, not once per month, And sometimes people do not talk about it. And The Palestinian community is considered one of the most clean communities, Everyone tries to be as clean as possible. House is really clean, of course.
I was going to add that, yes, because that in itself is an attack on values. It's an attack on the values that people hold dear.
Yeah. So suddenly she is extremely not happy because that cleanness is not there anymore. That tidiness in the house is not there anymore. That everything is well prepared, well ordered, that the food is clean, everything's here. None of that is there, And for men or for boys, they are just concerned with bringing water, taking water. Where can we find food? Where can we find money? Maybe we need to collect some wood, etc., etc. And then the sensitivity to the needs of women, for example, is not there. It's somehow lost, if I could say. So you encourage really women to remind people, I need this and I need that, and to say it openly and loudly. Now, under usual circumstances, when you are at home, you don't need to do that, You are at your own home, have 3 rooms, one of them is yours. You don't need to tell the boys or the men or anyone else, please give me some privacy. You don't need that. But in a tent, it's not like that. In a shelter, it's even worse than that because it's shared by 5 or 6 families, by maybe 40 or 50 women and girls at the same time. And that's why, what can you do, Yeah, you need to speak up. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to take a shower. I need to have this kind of material. I need this kind of privacy. I need this privacy for 10 minutes. I need it for 15 minutes. No one is really going to say no under usual circumstances, but you need to speak up. And this is something that really made a big difference for men, for many families and for many women. Of course, there are some other stories that women were really exposed to abuse, or they were like neglected, or they were like, on purpose, their rights were violated. And this happens in all societies, but it increases when the society is under trauma, And there were reports all the time of such things that would happen. And in that kind, you need a different kind of intervention, a very different kind of intervention, which is like more specific, more specialized. You go to dealing with a victim of sexual violence or gender-based violence. And in that case, the PFA team, they will immediately know that this is not their business. Okay, to educate the family is something that they need to do. But once they know about that, they need to report it to their senior colleagues at the team, and then the team will intervene, which means then a psychologist will go to visit, or the family will be invited, the victim herself first, to the center, and then the psychiatrist also will intervene, and then we'll have some sort of whole team work around that specific case. But it's very important to start with education, with telling women to speak up, because women could be very, very, very shy when it comes to their own issues, But that shyness, amid such circumstances, will really harm them a lot, because their needs are to be respected, and the needs of their kids are to be respected, and there is no other way around. Of course, there are some difficulties and challenges that are beyond the capacity of anyone. There is no shower. Water is not there. Power supply is not there. Water comes maybe 3 or 4 days per month, or maybe just 1 day per week. But well, when people know that, okay, our mom or our sister or my wife or my child needs to have a shower, then we manage around that, But there is a need to communicate your needs, and that's a very important tool just to help people around. But again, in serious cases, you need to work seriously around that, and not to be happy only with providing education and some basic support or counseling.
I mean, I was thinking as you were speaking how much that connects to some of the issues for men that were in the report, and thinking about maybe women not making demands in the way that you've spoken about is also because of their awareness of the imminent and possible loss of their men every single day, but also the intense vulnerability of men, which you speak about. And I wonder if you could just say something about how people, when they encounter violence, are able to speak about it with men when men themselves are on the edge and being violated in the ways that they are. Just wonder if you could say something about that.
You know, some of the negative coping mechanisms that the reports talk about is violence, you know. And I feel that there are like 3 types of violence that we have seen during the genocide or in Gaza Strip. You know, there are like, if violence could be divided, of course, or like, one is that someone who is out of frustration, who is a victim of everything that goes around him, who feels completely paralyzed and that there is nothing that he can help, doesn't have any money, doesn't have any kind of support or income. And he feels the heavy burden of being the breadwinner when he can't offer anything at all. And he keeps living these frustrations, and he feels the needs, and he sees it in the eyes of his wife and of his children, and then he just breaks out of anger or frustration every now and then. And sometimes he breaks in crying or in tears. Sometimes he breaks in anger. Sometimes he starts abusing his family members. Now, this is certain thing that we need to work on. I mean, being frustrated, being a victim yourself is not an excuse for being an aggressive or act of aggression against other people. But then there are the more serious cases where some men were traditionally aggressive towards their women, and the gender-based violence or violence against women was already there. And this is a totally separate idea. And then there is, unfortunately, the third type, which we see in this war, which is like, you know, people who are just criminals, if we could say simply, you know. These who were, for example, stealing trucks, for example. They were attacking trucks that were carrying food aid. And this is just committing a crime. It's not about violence or something psychological. It's just being a criminal, you know. And that's something that we unfortunately have seen and a lot. And this is something beyond the imagination of a community like the Palestinian community. So you need really to be aware of with whom you are really working. And again, not a single kind of type of this violence is really accepted. And maybe the wife will show that she understands why her husband did that. But in any case, you cannot live with that understanding, and that's it. You need really to work with her, you need to work with him in order to reduce any chances of that behavior would really return. And in some of the situation, you know, men all the time, you know, I mean, they felt sorry and they apologized to their wives or to their family. It's beyond my control, something like that, and that I just broke because of the circumstances. And women, like in most of everywhere else, they feel what's wrong with their husbands. They feel the pressures that are on them. And this is something, as you said, maybe they will ask for lesser, you know, requests. They will have lesser requests. But I mean, what lesser requests? I mean, when you are looking just for water to have a shower, when you are just looking for bread to have some food, there is no need really to say a single word. I mean, we haven't eaten for 2 days. What to say about that, you know? But that's the reality. I mean, the very difficult and tough realities in Gaza brought something that is beyond imagination to the lives of people. And it's really incredible how those families continue to survive. That's why when we talked about this, when we started to think about the report, we were thinking, you know, with the senior colleagues at GCMHP, what should we ask? You know, which type of groups we are going to talk about? Children, of course, children all the time are a priority. But we need also to take in mind also women and men, Men were all the time the least prioritized. No one cared about men mental health. I mean, everyone talks about the children, how we can help children, as if their parents do not matter. Okay, we talk about women, but from a gender perspective. But women are also human beings. I mean, you need to look at the wider view, and you need to look at men, especially in such circumstances, and then people who are like, older, because this is a very important age group, and I think these are the ones who are mostly vulnerable this time, because when you have months, weeks of lack of health services, then the most impacted people are the ones who are in need for health services. Those with chronic illnesses, those with diabetes, those with hypertension, those who need the very little medications and they are not available. Needless to speak about people who needed hemodialysis, for example, people who needed heart, I wouldn't say operations, just heart screening, and such a thing. What about them? What happened to them? A lot of the people who are like, they just died, and we keep hearing of people who die, and no one really asks why they died, but everyone feels it because the medication that they used to have, the care that they needed to receive is not there anymore. It's not there.
I mean, I'm thinking about so many different things as you've been speaking, Yasser, and speaking about what the deliberate infliction, the deliberate violation of people's intimate living spaces, the deliberate violation of bodies in the way that we have seen, and the deliberate violation of community organizations, so that the criminal gangs are the outcome that the aggressors want. They want the society to be broken down and humiliated. And I imagine that's part of the discussion with men and women, that everybody is responsible for themselves and their behavior, but this is also being deliberately inflicted on you. And I suppose it brings me to two other things, and perhaps before we open up. One is what you were just talking about, which is all the injuries to the body, all the harms to the body through the unavailability of medicine, the malnutrition, the lack of treatability of illnesses, and so on. And a lot of people then speak about their pain through the body. And so I'm just thinking about how working with the body is part of the repertoire of the team, and how that might be within the therapy that's offered.
Yeah, how the events affect the body is really something that we feel, or we used to feel all the time during the military operations, when there is a bombardment, when there is like when it was like going for 1 week, for 2 weeks, and we all the time write about that, and we call it the acute symptoms, the acute implications or impacts of the exposure to trauma, and which is like pain in joints, pain, low back pain in men and women, but more for the kids is in the abdomen, and pain in the ankles and the knees for everyone. You feel a little bit, a lot of various aches everywhere. We speak about some sort of somatization, that this fear stresses your nerves, that you start feeling it in your muscles, something like that. And we know that the body and the mind are connected. There is no doubt about that. But this is something that didn't stop after 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month. It's now ongoing for 15 or 16 months. How could your nervous system cope with that? How can your body cope with that? It's impossible. And that's why the big question is, what can we do in order to deal with that? And I tell you one thing, in the beginning, in the first few weeks, we were talking, we have several of our colleagues who are really experienced when it comes to mind and body medicine, when it comes to all kinds of exercises. And the reflection was, nothing of that really works. You cannot have a sleeping exercise, a breathing exercise, and you expect things to improve. You are really overstressed, you are overstretched, you feel too nervous, too anxious the whole day. But with time, you need to do something. And that's why we advise people to do some breathing exercise and maybe to walk also. Walking is very important, It helps you somehow move. But imagine, what can you do? What can you say? Water for a shower is not there anymore, So you encourage people to do some of those exercises, but it's not easy at all. One of the things that happened after, I think, 2021, it was like for 8 or 9 days, but the bombardment was very extreme, day and night. People continued to feel sleeping for 1 or 2 days after the ceasefire that happened. You need your nervous system to relax and to calm down. And we are waiting for Sunday. Inshallah, Sunday will work out, and we will see for what will happen. But these reactions need a lot of care, and we will need really to look later on what will happen with our bodies. Those people, are they going to somatize? Will they have some problems with their stomach, for example, with blood pressure, irritable bowel syndrome, for example? What kind of impact that could happen to them? Panic attacks, panic disorder. We will have to wait and see. That's a topic for further research, I think.
And people will need a lot longer than the first phase of this ceasefire. They're going to need a lot longer than that.
But again, when you talk about breathing exercises and some of such meditation, for example, yoga, for example, they will mock you. They will not be happy with what you are simply advising in the beginning. But maybe after 2 or 3 counseling sessions, they will start thinking about that more seriously.
Yes, I just wanted to finish really with a question which in a way goes back to the first report. One thing that comes across from this report really strongly is the trust that the people that you work with have in the team. And when men spoke about their fear that they might be using negative coping mechanisms, such as violence and short temper with their families, it's a very trusting thing to say to somebody who's inquiring about their mental health. And it really brings me on to this key matter that Victoria and Lama, I think, have touched upon, which is the need for the mental health provision for Gaza to be provided by the people within Gaza. Now, they're going to need enormous, massive support for that. But the threat is of organizations which have worked in Gaza for so long being somehow diminished or sidelined with an attempt to have some kind of clean sweep of a new administration in Gaza. And I just wanted to get and you spoke in the other report about the 3,000 psychology graduates who could be trained to provide mental health first aid, psychological first aid. Samah Jabbar has spoken about the need to have barefoot psychotherapists and psychologists. And I just wonder if we could finish by your commenting on that, the importance of the people who are part of the community of suffering, who are trusted because they're from the same culture, and the importance of them having the agency to do this work.
I would like to echo what Lama said in the chat. This is a very important question, Gwyn, especially the part when you spoke about being sided or singled out or something like that. This is something that I practically felt in January, February, maybe to beginning of March, when we were telling everyone we are working, and we speak about meetings that were taking place in Rafah, and we have seen how many privileges, if I could say, were given to the international organizations, while local ones were not on the map at all. And everyone looked at us with skepticism. I don't know for what reason, but it felt that if you are a local organization, okay, let's try not to work with them. Let's try to work with the international ones. Maybe they wanted to be more safe themselves, because no one is going to attack an international organization while,
They do, of course.
But they do, with time, they found out that, okay, there are some serious cases. What can we do with them? And whatever work they are doing, it's like just some simple type of work. Most of it is like PFA if they can do it. But when we have a serious case, we are going to refer that case. And we were already in the field working with full capacity from February, And then things started to change. And we are the co-chairs or the co-leads of the mental health MHPSS, mental health and psychosocial technical working group in Gaza. We with the UNRWA, and this should be backed by the clusters of health, education, and child protection. So we managed one way or the other to put our feet on the ground and to put ourselves on the map after a big struggle with that. But how many local NGOs can do that? Mm. And when I went out of Gaza in April, I started to meet people outside Gaza who had no idea that we were even functioning. Mm. And it was even reported by international organizations that no one is working. And then that's why, for example, that 10-minute video we decided to make in order to show people that we are working. No one can replace local NGOs. Today in the morning, we had a long meeting with the PINGO, Palestinian-Governmental Organization network in Gaza. We were about 25 members of the PINGO, and we were talking about what should we do the first day after ceasefire is reached. And we speak about organizations that work in the field of health, field of disability, field of education, and those very important fields: WASH, hygiene, women empowerment, and this kind of work. We feel that there will be an influx of international organizations, people who will come to offer help. When it comes to mental health services, I outlined that we expect those to cause more harm than help. Because if you are not really aware of the context, when you are trying to help, you will have more questions. You will ask for more details. And that will make them feel more isolated, more alienated. I'm talking to someone, and this comes with very strange questions that are so obvious. Why you haven't had shower for like 2 months? What kind of question is that? Okay. Why your father was beaten you? He was angry because he couldn't find me food. So he beaten you. That's unacceptable. Yes, it's unacceptable. But the way you react, it feels that you are coming out of the moon, out of somewhere else. And that is something that happened, unfortunately, for many previous times. And hopefully this will not happen, but it will happen again. Resources coming to Gaza, financial resources, support, funding. I think, unfortunately, many of the organizations will think that international organizations will be more secure to deal with them. But are we going to work according to the Israeli point of view, to the aggressor's point of view, or according to the needs of the population? We all the time talk about contextualizing our intervention, about having a culturally appropriate intervention, having people who know the culture very well. Well, we have those. And in addition to them, we have 3,000 graduates of psychology who don't have a place to work, who could be invested in. At least they can work the basic thing, provide psychological first aid. And time by time, weeks after weeks, they can receive further training. And there are many people who are interested in training people in Gaza, including some of the friends and colleagues who are available today with us, present today with us. But they can't reach Gaza Strip, not now because of the war, but also under normal circumstances. There is a huge blockade on people getting out and into Gaza Strip. How can we help with the training activities once people cannot go in? So there are many restrictions. We hope that these are going to stop from being there. They will not. They will continue. And we rely again on the international community to continue its pressure, not to stop activism once the ceasefire is reached. No. When a ceasefire is reached, it doesn't mean that everything is good. People will continue to live in the rubble of 80% of their houses in Gaza Strip being destroyed,
Yes, I think that is such a powerful takeaway message from you. And I think that all of us, psychotherapists here and other activists, really need to take that on board. And we need to galvanize ourselves. I think we need psychotherapists against genocide as well as doctors against genocide. And I absolutely think that challenging the idea that somehow sanitized international organizations coming in and doing the work that your colleagues are so supremely qualified to do, it's an obscenity and it's an insult. And I think that we all need to take up that on board and organize around exactly that. I think there may be questions. I mean, I feel always, Yasser, that I can talk to you forever, but I am aware that we have to allow space for Q&As. And
likewise, Gwyn, forever. Yes, of course.
So maybe we should just pause and see what questions there are from because I haven't been monitoring the chat because I've been so involved in our conversation. So perhaps we should just see what questions people might like to ask you.
So Gwyn, I want to say, so people can unmute themselves. I released you from this hold on your voice. So if you want to say something, please raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
I think there was one from Umberta Taufner.
Yes.
Oh yes,
Hello,
she's raised
Gwyn.
her hand. Hi, Umberta.
I admire, I'm so flabbergasted by the stories I heard. And I was, and also admire so much the work you're doing, Yasser, and the group is doing. I was wondering, do you do also collective interventions, like groups of children, groups of women?
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll answer that, and we'll also open the floor for people to know how they can help, because there is a question all the time about, okay, we have tried something in the United States, for example, or in Sweden. Would it work in Gaza or not? And I'll give you 3 examples, not only one, where we have tried group work with children and all of them worked. The first was COPE. It's, I think it's initially a Swedish-Canadian technique, which is COPE. It's like community parent education program. It helps parents understand what's wrong with their kids, and especially if their kids are aggressive or they are like temper or like they have some sort of conduct symptoms. So we have a group of Swedish colleagues who came to GCMHP in something like 2001, 2002. No, 5, I think. And they did their training on that technique. And the group of staff who received the training were our expert psychologists who work with children mainly. They liked it, they enjoyed the training, and then they started applying it, which really targeted mothers, And the idea is to educate them how they can help their children. And this was run in groups. And that was great. And it went for about 10 years. The same thing applies for school mediation. It was a program that helps children in schools about their, like, in secondary school and a little bit earlier, between the age of 12 and 15, 16, how they become problem solvers and mediators rather than, people who are fighting, bullying, etc., etc. And it worked very well. The third one was psychodrama for children, or cerebral drama. A group of Swiss colleagues came to Gaza for many years, for 5 years, and now we have psychodrama managers. They can do that. It works for groups of 12 children, and these are therapeutic also approaches. Now, the key behind the success of the 3 techniques is, first, people thought that they might work for Gaza. And when the professionals, our team, heard the training, they felt the same. That's the first one. The second one, they were piloted. We tried them with the people, and we found out that it worked. And then the third one comes, which is very important, which is to build our own manual. So we have now in Gaza a manual, a homemade manual for COPE, a homemade manual for school mediation, etc., etc., etc. So this is how things work. However, which one to be used depends on the needs of the society. And for years, we shifted those interventions. For example, about COPE, we trained kindergarten teachers, and they started working it with the parents. For the school mediation, we taught teachers, and then the teachers and school counselors started to teach themselves, those boys and girls at schools, and something like that. So
you seem to say that it wouldn't work in this war situation at all, the group.
There are. It depends on the objective. So we do group intervention with kids. Mainly, they sit together, they play together, and they draw together. But when it comes about deeper things, let's pick your drawing and hear what's the story. You cannot do that in groups usually, with kids. You need to do it at the individual level. So you see how the child is doing within the group. If you feel something is not right, just you invite the child for individual therapy. The thing that works for as therapeutic with the groups in children is psychodrama. But the setting now in Gaza under these circumstances do not allow such group intervention.
I want to take another couple of questions, Yasser. First of all, Pieter, I hope I've pronounced your name properly, and then Nancy. Would you like to go ahead?
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Yasser, I'm absolutely in awe regarding your courage and your professional empathy and your care. And on one hand, I absolutely shudder to refer to a specific therapy, and that is my asking, are you aware of the rewind therapy developed by Dr. Moss in Britain? I've based it on chat, the referrals to that, but this therapy is especially short, a very short therapy process intervention, and it is applicable to both one-to-one and especially also to groups, but certainly also to children within a certain age range. So this rewind therapy was also practiced by Dr. Moss in the genocide in mid Africa many years ago. Are you aware of rewind therapy, Dr. Yasser?
Well, personally, I'm not aware. Perhaps some of the colleagues are aware of it, but I think I'll look into that. We have had a meeting with 4 professors and psychotherapists about 5 months ago. It was, I think, in September or August, and we had a seminar with the colleagues from Gaza, mainly participating, looking into possible interventions or adding a new portfolio of interventions given the prolonged trauma. And we have already agreed on 3 interventions. With that, training will begin once a ceasefire is reached. I think I will just forward this information to my colleagues in Gaza, and we can look if that's a possibility. But then we will have to think about having like a couple of hours introduction by you yourself, by Professor Moss to the audience, and then if they feel that it might work, we can look further into that. And this
have
applies.
You put the information in the? Sorry, just checking. Have you put the information in the chat?
I have.
Perhaps together with your email, so that if Yasser wants to contact you, he
I'll
could
do that.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so
we're
much.
We're waiting now. Yes, Nancy. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, and to all of you, and to Victoria and Yasser, both old friends. I wonder if you could say something about 2 issues you talked about when you were here on a tour of the States 2 years ago. One was the issue of medications. Have you been able to actually get them in at all? What happens when people have to go off medications, and how do you cope with that? And the second is, are you developing any programs to deal with children who are amputees? I believe there are over 1,000 now, which is an absolutely horrific statistic.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy, and you look really great, and it's nice. I think it's sunny now in Boston anyway. I used to stay with the Murrays, with Nancy and Hubert, when I go to Boston, actually. It's a very lovely place there. You are raising, of course, a very important question, and you are aware of the problems that we have. Once the war started in October, the pharmaceutical companies who were bringing us medication, they stopped from functioning. Their warehouses were destroyed or not reachable. And that was a big problem. And I immediately, from early November, we felt that there will be a big problem with that, started to flag this issue with international organizations, And in our meetings, with the cluster meetings, with the WHO cluster meeting, or like it's called the health cluster meetings that is coordinated by the WHO. And we had very hard time during the very first couple of months. And I remember the first shipment we received was in late February from Anira, actually, with only 2 medications. Luckily, one was antidepressant and one was antipsychotic. And the WHO were working hard on that, obviously, but things were on the borders, and the numbers of trucks passing by every day was terribly low. But we got a couple of good shipments in March and in April. And since then, we are fine with medication, but we keep looking at our stocks, and at the same time, we keep the WHO aware of that, and we have their promise. And I think they will keep it. They are honest about that they will keep the needs for psychotropic medication covered. And to say also this in the second hand, we were closely working with the Ministry of Health, mental health specialists, department. So in the first couple of months when we didn't have medication, we were sending our patients to them. They were given medication. And then for a moment, no one really had any kind of medication. And now at the moment, it's the other way around. They don't have medications at all. And their patients come to receive drugs from our pharmacies. So we are trying to to provide the services as much as possible. The patient with mental disorder who is not receiving medication is a big burden on his or her family. No doubt about that. But sometimes a mental health or a psychotropic medication is a life-saving. Imagine someone who has some impulses or like some delusions or hallucinations that someone is ordering him to kill himself. If you don't have the antipsychotic medication, what will happen? If someone is deeply depressed and thinking of suicide, of course, antidepressant will not solve the problem, but it will. What will happen if you don't give him the medication? So it could be life-saving, and that's somehow managed so far. And luckily, from next week, we will have more access to medication. And the second question was about, and we continue to talk with Anira, of course, about sending more medications, and I think that would work.
The second one was about amputees, children.
Yeah. Well, we developed a project, I think like intervention plan that will work with orphans, and we speak about 20,000 orphans. We have the numbers from town association, and they will be supporting us doing that. We will try to target at least half of them in the next 6 months, and this is a lot of work really for GCMHP, but we will try to find the ones who are in need, and we'll involve some other stakeholders. It will not only be our work, others who can help, especially with the counseling, with the psychoeducation, with the basic needs. They are welcome to join the work, but we'll focus more on mental health interventions. Now, for amputees, we all the time we're working, doing this kind of work, and the big lesson that we worked was after the Great March of Return, when hundreds of people ended up with becoming amputees. The key role to provide mental health services is to integrate the mental health services within the health facilities that provide care for those people. We speak about rehabilitation facilities, we speak about the reconstruction facilities, we speak about orthopedic facilities, and the key role is to try to work through them. Like it could be like a case manager working in those organizations, or hospital care, etc., and will be an added service to those services, because it's very, very peculiar and very strange and very sensitive issue to deal with amputees. Some of them they have the heroic feeling. Some of them will not accept to go to a mental health therapist. Some of them will have a very high stigma towards mental health services. Some of them, their main problem is pain control and pain management. Actually, pain management for those who are in need for orthopedic surgeries and for those who are amputees is all the time a big problem. And that's why the better way to reach out to those kind of population is to do it through the health system itself. And that's something that worked well during the months after the Great March of Return demonstrations. And but this is a very valid and very important question. Then the other category really that needs a lot of care is people who were detained in Israeli prisons. We don't speak about the people who were already in Israeli prisons before October 7th, but we speak about the thousands who were tortured, who were taken from their neighborhoods, from their shelters, from their tents, and or at cross checkpoints, and they were like tortured, beaten up, and they are going to be released. This is this is going to be a very challenging group of people.
I think,
God help us, Nancy. We have a lot of things ahead of us.
I think, Yasser, that is probably the subject we maybe should have a whole webinar on exactly that subject, because we haven't really even been able to touch upon it. Just in relation to the issue of child amputees that Nancy raised, I thought that this is a good moment to invite my dear colleague Lama to sum up by referring to the campaign of No Child a Target. Children are amputees because they were targets. And just before I invite Lama, I'd like to say an absolutely wholehearted, warm thank you to you, Yasser, for your incredible words and your everything that you've shared with us and your wisdom and humanity.
Thank you very much. We have such a great team in Gaza, GCMHP. We have such a resilient population who is struggling with the most difficult circumstances and such a lovely supporter networks around the globe. And I'm really feel the warmth and the importance of such a meeting. Thank you very much, Gwyn.
Thank you very much. And I'll now hand over to Lama to end the webinar. Thank you, Lama.
Thank you, Gwyn, and thank you, Yasser and Victoria. Truly a phenomenal meeting. So I'll be very brief. I know we have 2 minutes only. I just posted in the chat a link to a petition to sign, another link to a letter campaign. When you write it, it goes to the President of the United States and the Vice President. And the last thing is a link to a letter. You know, you can just copy and paste and send it to 10 friends. And while you do that, I'll tell you about No Child a Target. It's a campaign launched by the Palestine-Global Mental Health Network and our international counterparts. The goal of the campaign is really to become a movement. I had nice slides, but I don't have time to show you. We are in 21 countries and 3 more countries are joining us. And the hope is that everywhere on the planet will be calling No Child a Target, protect Palestinian children. Probably I'm repeating things you know. Our children are the only children on the planet prosecuted by military court. Before October, 700 to 800 children are detained, taken from their parents in the middle of the night. The Knesset passed a law like 2 months ago that says children as young as 12 could be prosecuted and get a life sentence as young as 12. So really our children are not children. I mean, the campaign says our children need to be children. And the call is to force Israel to abide by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Now, of course, that's the big global aim, but it's baby steps and we're going there. And it's, you know, so your support would be, we have already over 500,000 signatures on the petition. We wanted to reach 1 million and hopefully eventually 8 billion, everybody on the planet calling. And, you know, I'll end with this, keep talking about Palestine, keep posting, keep sharing, keep disrupting, keep protesting, and don't stop believing that Palestine will be free. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Can I just suggest everybody unmutes and give Lama and Yasser and Victoria a huge round of applause?